This is the year where the smart move is to trust Penn State and James Franklin.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This Penn State team is following the championship blueprint. They returned the best veteran core in the country. Somehow they upgraded a coaching staff that was already top 10 a season ago in both offense and defense. And then you could see some of the craziest results here where Penn State might have to go through Ohio State 3 times to achieve history. You are locked on to Penn State football. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show as always. Thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We're going to go through all of it. This is the official preview and predictions episode for Penn State football over here at Locked On Nittany Lions. So we're going to go through the playoff, the teams that I have picked to go through the college football playoff, what the bracket's going to look like, and make some predictions. We're also going to go game by game, a breakdown, a quick preview of all 12 regular season games for Penn State, how they will do, and reasonings behind them, why they will happen the way they happen, why they happen the way they happen, and a full season preview here of what makes this team a national title contender, why this is one of the best teams in the country, but also what setbacks could happen here for this Penn State team. So we're going to go through all of it. This is the overview you need. Friendly reminder, be a part of the conversation down in the comments section. Now let's start with why you should love this Penn State football team, why you should back this Penn State football team. Between Drew Allar, Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen, 80% of the starting offensive line, honestly 100% of the starting offensive line, because there were 6 players that rotated in, 5 of them are back, and they're starting caliber. And then on defense, you bring back Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, Zach Wheatley. So this veteran core is one of the best in the country, and it's the formula. Look, I'm not here I don't have time to debate what Michigan is dealing with, but the formula, the blueprint, Penn State is following it. Michigan did it. Ohio State did it, where you retain your veteran players, you retain your nucleus. Penn State has done that this time around with superstar caliber players at the college level on both offense and defense. There were question marks about J.J. McCarthy. He changed the narrative. Same thing with Drew Allar. Question marks about Drew Allar. He changed the narrative. That Michigan team had 2 running backs. Well, Penn State brings back Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen, guys that were 2 top 10 running backs in the NFL draft. The offensive line and then defensive players that, let's compare them to Ohio State, JT Tuimoloau, and a player like Jack Sawyer, Dennis Sutton fills that role. And there are other breakout players that we're going to talk about that are going to emerge here. So it's not only the superstar players that they were able to gather, but it's also that they were able to retain. But the breakout players that will move up into that status of star caliber. Tony Rojas at linebacker. Guy runs a sub 4.4. That is not normal. So he's able to make plays in both the running and the passing game. And if you have your doubts about Rojas, that's fine, because he didn't have that breakout sophomore season. You could call it a slump, if you will. But the dude played through an injury. So Tony Rojas will be at full strength. You have A.J. Harris, who is potentially a first-round NFL draft pick in 2026. Zuriah Fisher, that's the player that I was referring to. Somebody that has dealt with injuries, but there is a consensus. Penn State will pound this drum that if you have to pick any player to break out or to truly emerge as a game changer, it is Zuriah Fisher. I could also make the argument for Khalil Dinkins, somebody that James Franklin says is an NFL caliber tight end at this point in time and will be selected in next year's NFL draft. And then someone who's kind of quietly coming along that definitely needs some more recognition. I would say Xavier Gilliam at that defensive tackle spot, who is arguably competing for starting reps at this point. That's a surprise to me when I like Alonzo Ford a lot. He's not going to take reps away from Zane Durant. So that means Alonzo Ford and Xavier Gilliam are in a starting battle. So it's players that are on breakout watch for Penn State that are going to emerge. And I could name a few other players. And Anthony Donko, I don't think, has enough respect on the offensive line. Somebody that was playing at his best before he was injured a season ago. So Penn State has the veteran players and the players that will step up and emerge that will really complete this team. And let me continue. Coordinators. Andy Kotelnicki returns. That would have been a massive loss to this team if he had taken a head coaching job with West Virginia. He is back. It's that consistency. It's the continuity. Penn State has the best coordinator duo now in the country. You retain Andy Kotelnicki. You add Jim Knowles. The team that has been the thorn in the side of Penn State for a decade. Jim Knowles, the best defensive coordinator in the country, comes over from Columbus into Happy Valley. So what that does is you get to knock Ohio State a step backwards. You also bring him over to your side. It's not that just, he leaves the Buckeyes. He also joins your team. Iron sharpens iron. I fully believe that. So now Andy Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles get to go up against each other in practice on a day-to-day basis and play 4D chess on a day-to-day basis. That stuff matters. The guy who built the formula to stop this Penn State team, Penn State had its worst offensive performance all season. Even against Notre Dame, even against Oregon, they were still respectable performances, even though they resulted in a loss overall. But when it came to that Ohio State game, Jim Knowles shut down the Nittany Lions. That was easily the worst performance Penn State had put together all season long last year under Andy Kotelnicki. And now the guy that did that is on your side. So a team that was top 10 in both categories in offense and defense now gets better. Here's the other part of it. So I talk about the players, the personnel there. It's the additions that Penn State made. Amari Campbell. Penn State's linebacker room was a question mark. And according to Jim Knowles, and then we'll talk about this in the setbacks too, still has questions about the depth, but they improved it. They go and get a starter, an all-conference player in Amari Campbell from North Carolina. Tamir Robinson to Amari Campbell, that's a significant upgrade. Then you get 3 wide receivers in the transfer portal, all upgrades over what they had a season ago in Trey Wallace and Amari Evans. Now you change that to Trevor Pena, who was all conference at Syracuse, Kyron Hudson, who has played Big Ten football at USC, and then Devontae Ross, who is a speedster, who I think is going to be a significant game changer for Penn State, and he is the key to truly unlocking this offense. The return of King Mack, return of the Mac, as a lot of people were saying when he did that, he is factoring into starting reps at the safety spot. So you add 5 starters at key positions for a national title run. But we got to get to the setbacks. Linebacker depth is one of them. I mean, Jim Knowles went on the record and said that he doesn't trust some of the backups at this point in time, but he likes the trio that he has in Amari Campbell, Dom DeLuca, and Tony Rojas. To start, things could change. I would also, because this has been a focal point in the offseason, defensive tackle depth. It's great to see that Xavier Gilliam has stepped up and pushing for starting reps, but if you have injuries to Zane Durant, another player I would highlight, Zachy Wheatley, the same goes for anything. If Ohio State were to lose Jeremiah Smith or were to lose Caleb Downs in that kind of situation, that applies to Penn State as well. But they're strong. Here's the thing, though. To go off of that, Penn State is strong where it really matters. Winning teams run the football. Penn State's offensive line is top 3 in the country. The running back room is top 3 in the country conservatively. You should make the argument between Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen that group is the best in the country. That's what I'm saying over here. And the way that the schedule lines up for Penn State, you have a favorable setup going into Oregon. You have a favorable setup going into Ohio State. That matters, and it continues to build confidence. It continues to build momentum. So everything is aligning for Penn State. That is my point above all else here. Everything is aligning for a national championship run. The national championship run is there, but how it happens, and if they get there, that's the question we're going to answer here on Locked On Nittany Lions. So we're going to go through the schedule, game by game. Which ones are trap games? Because Iowa, that could be one that's a struggle, but more importantly, everybody wants to know, will Penn State finally win the big game? I think they're going to handle Oregon pretty decisively. Ohio State, though, that's the one you got to have circled. We're going to discuss that next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under the tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. And if traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head over to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That is Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, let's go game by game. So we have to go through 12 regular season games here, where as we sit here right now towards the end of preseason, these are my expectations. Obviously, as injuries come about or anything like that on both sides, predictions can change. I want to preface that. But this is how I see things right now on paper if everything stays for the most part status quo. So the first 3 weeks, we know the out-of-conference schedule is pretty easy. So we're going to go through these rather quickly so we can focus on the bigger games at hand. The Big Ten slate is entertaining when you have Oregon and Ohio State on the schedule. Two big games that Penn State absolutely has to win here. Nevada, 56-7, Penn State wins. Nevada might not even score in this game. So somewhere it's no more than a garbage time touchdown here. I don't think Penn State will get into total and complete rhythm here, because again, it is a fresh start with Jim Knowles and 3 transfer portal wide receivers. Not saying that it's going to be anything egregious, but just look for them to build some rhythm and start to lay the foundation and the building blocks for what the offense is really going to look like. Same thing with the defense. Okay, so the passing attack is relatively new, so is the defense, but Nevada is just so abysmal. This is a run first team, a run only team. Honestly, I don't know that Penn State's going to be able to just bully them for the sake of Nevada can't move the football, and their defense is just going to fall apart because they'll be on the field so much. You can lean on the ground game. That's what Penn State's going to do. FIU. This is where I think Penn State, with Nevada under its belt, you start to figure out and tinker with some of the issues. FIU, a similar team that is slightly better than Nevada, but you're also going to catch the Nittany Lions with a little bit of momentum. I say 70-7, and this is where Penn State begins to find its offensive identity and see what's clicking, what works. FIU is going to be the punching bag there, and that's where Penn State's offense is going to start to materialize in week 2. Same thing with Villanova, but with the bye week, with Oregon and the Whiteout, Penn State will still win because that's an FCS team. Villanova, a respectable FCS team for what it is worth. I say 63-7. Again, another garbage time touchdown here and there. Maybe does this get to double digits where they score 10 or a second touchdown? That happened the last time they played Villanova. I don't see it that way. It splitting hairs there, but with the bye week with Oregon, I could see Penn State maybe letting off the gas, but this is an FCS game. This is a Penn State team that's just miles ahead of where Villanova, the Wildcats are. So 63-7 is my score prediction there. Oregon, after the bye week, here's the thing. Oregon is a relatively new team. They keep their coordinators, which is great for them. But new starting quarterback, mostly new starting offensive line, new tailback, new wide receivers, injuries that they're dealing with already that we can project and make an assessment of them at this point in time. Relatively new defense. A lot of the secondary has changed. Now, they're good players, but they have to build that chemistry. Penn State, for the most part, already has that chemistry. And if they were catching Oregon late in the season, that's what's going to be intriguing. Are those teams going to catch Penn State later on in the season? That's something to watch out for. But I think Penn State wins decisively here against Oregon. Whiteout environment's going to help. Oregon is traveling across the country, breaking in a new quarterback, just breaking in new personnel overall. But watch out for Oregon to surge late. Doesn't matter. In week 5, Penn State is going to beat Oregon 38-27. Now going on the road to UCLA. That could be a trap game. If we want to define trap game is a game where you are not expecting your opponent to play better. And again, you're past your expectations. The Bruins add Nico Iamaleava, but it's the road trip. It's the 6-hour cross-country flight to UCLA and an obvious letdown spot. I think Penn State is good enough to not let UCLA trip them up in this game, but traveling West Coast, time change, long trip. I know they did it last year against USC. But UCLA will at least give them a fight, especially in the first half. Penn State might have to come from behind in the second half. I still see them winning decisively, 31-20. But do not overlook that game as, it's just the Bruins. UCLA shouldn't. No, Penn State's going to be in a slugfest here, I think, with UCLA, especially early on. But they'll get the win. Back home against Northwestern, homecoming game. I don't see Northwestern as a threat at all. I say 45-10. Penn State's just going to be able to run all over them. Have no issues. Iowa, though, again, you could look at Northwestern as that, another game where Penn State, could they be looking ahead? Spooky things happen at Kinnick Stadium. Iowa's going to be a better team. It's a serviceable offense. It's not an abysmal offense. It's a better offense. I know what I'm looking at. I know what I'm aware of here. I still like Penn State overall. I just don't know that Iowa, even with an improved offense, is going to be able to go toe-to-toe, step for step with Penn State. Now, in the past, Penn State, did get into close calls. I mean, they had Saquon Barkley once upon a time, right? Trace McSorley. And even still, Penn State had to win with a walk-off touchdown. Maybe it does get to that. I don't see it. I'm still going to say this is a one-score game, though. Penn State beats Iowa 27-20. Then you have a bye week. Ohio State at Columbus. Here's the thing that's going for Ohio State primarily is that they are a new team, a newer team like Oregon. New starting quarterback, new running backs, new offensive line. You're replacing 8 starters on defense, new offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. Is this enough time for your team to get truly settled in for an elite caliber? That's why I don't know that they can beat Texas. Because for the most part, Texas has its nucleus, its continuity. Ohio State doesn't have that. And are they going to be ready for that? Ohio State does have the bye week. So that's what's interesting is both teams have 2 weeks to prepare for their respective opponent. It's in Columbus. That's where you're going to see Ohio State favored for the most part. I still like Penn State. And that's the Jim Knowles factor. It's taking away... And I'm not saying that, Jim Knowles is going to know exactly how they're going to run their system. No, they're going to make changes to the system. But having the best offensive coordinator in college football versus Matt Patricia, having Andy Kotelnicki, who's a top 5 offensive coordinator, versus Brian Hartline, who's a first-time offensive coordinator, it sets up for Penn State. That's the difference. It's the coordinator battle. It's Drew Allar going into year 4, Julian Sayin going into year 1 starting. The 2 veteran running backs. Penn State's offensive line is better. Penn State's defensive line is better. So the battle in the trenches, the coordinators, the veteran experience at key positions, give me Penn State 35-31. Ohio State is going to win games by trying to outscore the opponent. Look for the Buckeyes to try to put up 50 points as much as possible because they think the defense will be good, but it's not going to be as strong as it's been in years past. So they're going to try to win by scoring as much as possible. Then the following week, I think Indiana's going to have a slow start, but a strong finish. This game I would not look past. I think Curt Cignetti is a phenomenal coach. I don't care what happened against Notre Dame. That's a one-time moment. Curt Cignetti is still one of the best coaches in all of college football, and he's proved that. This one, I think, is a one-score game because you are going into another letdown spot. Indiana wants to either try to play spoiler or build some momentum and try to get their name back into the college football playoff conversation. Again, Penn State in a letdown spot, traveling back from Columbus. This one has upset potential. Same thing. I don't know that Indiana has enough to beat Penn State. 31-23, it's a one-score game. Indiana makes it interesting. On the road, East Lansing at Michigan State. I mean, I'll give Jonathan Smith credit. I think he's building up a team that is going to be progressively more respectable. They got the coaching hire right. This just isn't the year. This is another rebuild year for Michigan State. Penn State 41, Michigan State 24. I like Aaron Childs. I like Nick Marsh a ton. I think he's honestly the second best wide receiver behind Jeremiah Smith in the Big Ten, but that's not enough to beat Penn State, those two players alone. Nebraska, game 11. This is a Nebraska team that might have no losses, one loss, college football playoff aspirations. I am buying into this Nebraska team to shatter expectations nationally. I think they will have momentum to get into the postseason, and a win against Penn State would put them there. Matt Rule, Dylan Raiola is only going to get better over the course of the season. Will this Nebraska team be peaking at the right time? Yes, they will. But again, is it enough to beat Penn State? Probably not. It's a one-score game, though, 28-20. I think this back end of the schedule, because of the way that it sets up, Iowa, Ohio State, Indiana, Nebraska, all these teams that are progressively going to get better, these games will be closer than you might initially imagine. But Penn State still wins. I think it's a lot of emotional, a lot of emotional attachment for this game for Matt Rule over at Nebraska. Business as usual, business trip at Rutgers to finish the season. Has Rutgers ever posed a challenge to Penn State in recent memory? No. Ever? How about in history? Not even in recent memory. Total, comprehensive memory. Give me the Nittany Lions, 49-7 over the Scarlet Knights in New Jersey. 12-0 regular season. They are undefeated. Offense will be averaging over 40 points per game. The defense will be holding teams to under 20 points per game in total based on regular season totals there. That is what Penn State is capable of this time around. But now, does Penn State have to go through Ohio State 3 times in order to get to the national championship? Or is it going to be somebody else that trips them up in a college football playoff? Penn State's going to be one of the top seeds. We'll start with the Big Ten Championship coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by OpenPhone. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on, that's okay, but that's why you need OpenPhone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with customers. OpenPhone is the #1 business system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? OpenPhone has solved that instantly. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more who's handling this, who's handling that. See why over 60,000 businesses trust OpenPhone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnCollege. That is OpenPhone.com/LockedOnCollege. They'll even port your existing numbers over for free. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. And this episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football starts this week. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in the game. And there's a special promo going on this weekend. For this weekend, PrizePicks is offering major max discounts. Max discount number 1 is Avery Johnson for this Saturday. If you like him to go over half of a passing yard, you can select that. The other max discount is still going on all the way up till the opener of the NFL season. That is Dak Prescott. Same thing, over half a passing yard. If you like those, you can choose those. PrizePicks is simple to play. Just pick more or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection. If you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. That is PrizePicks. PrizePicks, run your game. So to answer the question, is Penn State going to potentially have to play Ohio State 3 times? In theory, it is truly possible. I don't think it happens because based on the results, I think Texas beats Ohio State week 1. I think that Penn State beats Ohio State later on in the season. And then based on tiebreakers, that opens the door for a dark horse contender like Michigan, maybe USC. I'm going to go with Oregon because, again, I think this is a team that second half of the season is really going to catch some fire. If the only loss is to Penn State, therefore they hold all the tiebreakers and would be back in that Big Ten championship. I've seen that prediction made other places, so I tend to agree with that based on other results. It is totally possible that Ohio State beats Texas, loses to Penn State, and then there's a rematch, and then they might play in the college football playoff. I will say this, though. I do think Penn State plays Ohio State again in the playoffs, so we'll talk about that in just a moment. There's a rematch with Oregon here, neutral field. I think there's a little more scoring because Oregon's offense is really going to settle in at that point in time. Revenge factor. Penn State 38, Oregon 35. I don't know that Oregon can stop the ground game when all's said and done. I will need to see it. The battle in the trenches is what is going to decide some of these closer games against the elite competition. I don't think Oregon has enough to go up against Penn State's offensive line and the running backs. Again, all things considered, everybody's healthy, everyone's playing, that kind of thing. Now, college football playoff. The 12 teams that I have in there, and we'll see how this holds up as the season goes along and everything. But these are the teams that I genuinely like. That I look at them and I say, there's no way they miss the college football playoff. After that, there are some teams in there that they're fringe picks because the group of 5, group of 6 is going to be a complete cluster. But these are the teams that I do genuinely like. Obviously, Penn State. And Penn State could be the number 1 seed here, but if an SEC team goes undefeated, if that's Texas, if that's Georgia, they could easily take the top spot with a strength of schedule dilemma or something like that. So, but let's assume Penn State is the number 1 seed here. Georgia, number 2 seed. Texas, the number 3 seed. Clemson, I like Clemson a lot. I would say there are a lot of parallels between Clemson and Penn State. The only question mark about Clemson is their ground game. Freshman running back will get better as the season goes along. Kotelnicki is going to do a lot of the running as well. Oregon will have those 2 losses and be a 5 seed. Alabama is a sneaky team that I would keep an eye on. And I'll tell you why. And maybe that's a team that Penn State plays. Kansas State, if they're the Big 12 champion, they get in as the 7 seed. They might have 1 or 2 losses, and that's where and they're not doing the conference champions are the automatic 4 spots. It is straight seeding across the board. Ohio State, if they only lose to Texas and Penn State, they're going to be in the playoff. They'll be the 8th seed in my mind. Texas A&M at number 9. A lot of people like Texas A&M. I'll throw them in there. Illinois, I continue to look at Illinois' schedule, and I don't know. They're this year's Indiana. I don't know how you can say that Illinois is not built for a surprise playoff push. Notre Dame at number 11. I can't leave them out. I wanted to. I really did. This schedule is unforgiving for Notre Dame, but they have enough where they can battle all the way back, and I think the committee will be forgiving if they potentially lose, because I think they lose to both Miami and Texas A&M right out of the gate. Notre Dame's 0-2. Everybody's talking smack. But then they will rattle off 10 wins in a row, and I think all will be forgiven at that point in time. So they get the 11 seed because of that. I think the schedule, really, there are no gimmies on that schedule for Notre Dame. Yeah, sure, they're going to be favored in contests, but I think that's going to help them at the end of the day. Strength of schedule truly favors Notre Dame. The group of 5, Liberty, I guess. That is purely a guess. Other teams that are in contention, obviously Boise State's going to be one of them. I think that team will be Liberty, though. It's simply because of an easy schedule, but that one spot has to go to someone. It's going to be Liberty in my mind. Okay, so some of these predictions are easier than others. Oregon's going to beat Liberty by a lot. We know that. 5 versus 12. Alabama beats Notre Dame. I like Alabama a ton. As a 6 seed, that is a dark horse contender. Kalen DeBoer is going to remind people why he's one of the best coaches in all of college football. Illinois and Kansas State, that's an interesting 7-10 matchup. I'm going to take Illinois here because of the Big Ten factor. Brett Bielema is an experienced head coach. Give me the Fighting Illini here. Ohio State and Texas A&M at 8 and 9. Now, if you move Texas A&M to that 10 seed, I think they would blitz Kansas State. So this is a matchup that you do not want in the first round. I will take Ohio State here. And then as you move on, Penn State is going to get that second matchup with Ohio State. That's another one this one is going to be less, it's going to be similar to that Penn State Notre Dame game from the regard of it's going to be a slow start, but a fast finish. And this is where Penn State is going to have that advantage. They know that experience. They know what it takes. They went through that. And I know Ryan Day has been battle tested, playoff tested. His team hasn't. Most of his team has not. Penn State is fresh off of that experience. They will get the win here. Not as many fireworks as the regular season game. I think Penn State's going to be very conscious of ball control because they don't want to get into another shootout with Ohio State. I will say something along the lines of 28-24. Clemson and Oregon, give me Clemson. I like this Clemson team a lot. They return so much starting production. Georgia versus Illinois. I don't think Illinois has enough to keep up with Georgia, so Georgia will move on. Texas and Alabama, that's going to be a matchup for the ages, but give me Alabama. I think Kalen DeBoer is much better of a coach than Steve Sarkisian. Simpson going into his second season. Arch Manning is starting for the first year. I don't know that there's much that separates Arch Manning and Simpson, which is crazy to think, but Kalen DeBoer is an offensive mastermind. Ryan Grubbs is back as his OC. Alabama is one of those teams, the same thing that I say about Ohio State and Oregon. I think Alabama has that, where there's just so much raw talent as they settle in over the course of the season. That's a team that you do not want making the playoff, period, unless you're Alabama, right? Penn State versus Clemson. This prediction probably has to go with the fact that this is a matchup that I want to see. Tom Allen against his former team, James Franklin versus Dabo Swinney. Again, the difference, the battle in the trenches. Clemson's running game, I don't think, is good enough at this point in time. Give me Penn State over Clemson, probably in a little bit of a lower scoring type of situation. I'll go 24-20. Again, ball control is going to be key. You don't want to get into shootouts at this point. Georgia versus Alabama, another one for the ages. I just think Alabama has the better setup. Georgia's going to be defensively sound. They clearly trust Gunnar Stockton. They overhauled that wide receiver core because they led the league in drops a year ago. That's why I don't think they should have pushed Carson Beck out the door. But Stockton does give them that dual threat aspect. I am telling you, I've just heard good intel about Alabama from other people that cover the sport nationally, that's the team to trust if they get to the postseason. I will take Alabama, and they're going to try to put up a ton of points. Something along the lines, in the 30s there. So I won't give you an exact score prediction there. But Penn State and Alabama is going to be my championship game. And Kalen DeBoer, being that he's been there as Washington's head coach, now they lost to Michigan, but he knows how to win those close games. Is that talent experienced enough to push past Penn State's? I think Penn State, anything below the national title, getting there is going to be a disappointment. If they get upset early on, anything like that. I'm the Locked On Nittany Lions host. I don't think it's fair to go against my team at this point in time. Penn State is overall the better team. Alabama is certainly going to that's going to be a game where you have to get into a shootout. I really don't know how you limit Alabama's offense with where it could be peaking at this point in time. I'm going to say Penn State wins. I'm going to say they get their first official national championship since 1986, since 1994, when they should claim that national championship like other schools, because why not? But that is going to be my playoff prediction. Penn State, this is the season. It follows the blueprint. This is what James Franklin has been working for. He gets that big game win early in the season against Oregon, parlays it into another win against Ohio State, and Penn State's probably at that point where nothing can stop us. No one can overtake us. And it's that experience in the college football semifinal that they understand what it takes, what they need to do. And these other matchups that they're going to face along the way, because of where teams are, they don't have that similar luxury. So based on where everything is right now, again, things can change. If certain players aren't available, if other teams' nucleuses are more intact as opposed to another, then obviously predictions are changed. But this is what I'm going to go with right now as we sit here in late August, leading up to the season. Penn State over Alabama, 38-31, high scoring in the national championship game, and James Franklin solves everything here. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. I know people that are outside the Penn State fan base are going to be like, no surprise here, the Penn State podcast host picked the Nittany Lions. This is the year to do it. That is where I will finish. This is the year to do it, because if not now, then when? All the eggs are in this basket. So if they don't do it this year, then it's going to be such an uphill climb for the next, who knows, 5 years if they stay committed to James Franklin. James Franklin is not on the hot seat if they don't meet expectations this season. But things do obviously change, and that trust in him is going to change significantly. I do think Penn State delivers here because they check all of those boxes for a championship team. The offensive line, the ground game, the quarterback, the coordinators, star players that are emerging at positions of need, all those things together lead to a national title. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of Locked On Nittany Lions. As always, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Feel free to drop your predictions down in the comments section. Let me know what questions you have about certain teams or certain games in the schedule. We're going to be talking about it all season long. So be here. Don't miss a show. Become an everydayer. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast for all the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams every single day.